Okay, we're going to then start something new. When you get married, no one ever tells you there's 3 columns. His, hers, and ours. So everybody is fighting back and forth because nobody knows what the agreements are, because there aren't any agreements. Most people get married with about 2 agreements. I do. And the second one, I wish I hadn't. I'm being humorous and facetious. But when you get married, you don't have agreements. You haven't got that hours worked out. It can really be a heavy-duty conflict time. So when we got married, I put one thing in Jerry's column. Excuse me, that was a... Come, Jerry. All right, I put one thing in Jerry's column permanently, that before we got married. So write it in your column. I will never do yard work. Now, that did not mean he had to do it. It just meant he had to take care of that problem. No. Wrong column. His. So in Jerry's column, then he'd write yard work. You see how it would work? That's all right. He can say Betty won't do whatever, so that means I have to. Or that none is done. I never broke it. So I have never done any. 0. Very few women could say they've never done any. It has to do with physical limitations. It has to do with something I just really cannot do. So it was not about being stubborn or being selfish. It was about limitations. Okay. Now the next question, hers. So what shall we put in hers? In mine we'd say responsible. This pen is not going to cooperate. Responsible for a good home environment. And I'm speaking of physical environment. Okay, now we're not recommending these categories, but we're recommending you better know which fits in which category, or you're going to be fighting. An example of a place where we almost had a terrible fight, I went out into the yard one day with Jerry, and I said, when are we going to do something about the fence? He thought I was slaughtering him with a tack, because it was a question that was confronting him. And I said, no. I don't even care if we do it 5 years from now. I just want a date or a time or a year that we're going to do the fence. He immediately said, this year, and the whole problem was resolved. If you are messing up with how you're saying it, don't get offended because they're offended. Just figure out, how did I mess up? I messed up how I said that. He didn't understand what I was saying. Is that good? So that's an hours. Well, it isn't, because I ended up finding somebody to do the fence. Yeah. Well, the men for men's. Does that make sense? His, ours, clean the garage, ours. It could fit in another category, but we chose to fit it in that category, that we would both be responsible for an organized garage. Ours, cooking. This was important because we spent 10 years fighting over the ownership of the kitchen. He was very annoyed at the way I took care of the kitchen. And it was because we had so many people come in and out of the house, they'd leave dishes, and he was really mad at me. He was really mad at me for 10 years. And he'd go in that kitchen when he came home from work, and he'd wipe off the cabinet, about this big a cabinet area, and that meant he's really angry. And I kept saying, that kitchen is mine, leave it alone. So he was putting it in his hours, and I was saying it's mine, I was putting it in hers. So that's when you get something in the wrong column, and then you're fighting about what the column should be. Does that make sense? So one day after 10 years, he said, I give you the kitchen. Immediately, I said, I give it to you. And the entire fight was over. So this is how silly we can be. But if you don't even know about these columns, if you think you're silly, no, you're in a state of constant war if you don't know there's three choices. Does that make sense? You better know there's three choices, and you better know how that works so that it will cause you 100,000% less stress. Okay? It's important that this be agreed upon. For example, Jerry does I keep calling you Jesus, honey. Jerry does all banking. And I pay the bills because I was a bookkeeper. Money is ours, and all money is ours. There's no my money and his money. My parents, my money, his money, fought continually, never stopped fighting for 50-some years. It was over his money, her money, his money, her money. My dad said, I'll go on a vacation if you pay for it, Laura. So that was an ugly fight. If everything you own, all your money, all your accounts, everything you have is ours, that is really good stuff, as long as nobody plays dirty pool with it. Okay, I want you to just write his, hers, and ours. And yes. Well, there's his responsibility, your responsibility, and our responsibility. It's a good question. It's a better question than you may realize. His responsibility, her responsibility, ours. And some of that fits into each category. Why don't you answer the question, Jerry?
You just answered.
Well, work the his, hers, and ours. What category do you put sex in?
You put it in all three, because there's his responsibility for completing the act in both directions for everybody's satisfaction. It's her responsibility for leading up to it and things like this and afterwards. And it's both of your responsibility to be at a certain place in a certain condition at a certain time, and you go from there.
Don't you love the way he gives sex lessons? He's just fabulous. I think he should make it permanent tape, don't you? Well, the act of sex itself is this, and giving. The act of sex is giving. If one side is giving more than the other side, it's not right. The act of sex is giving, 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 giving. The ours is at the end of sex. You stay together, and the woman kind of gurgles with satisfaction and doesn't jump out of bed to go clean herself up. I'm just being very blunt.